What's up, Janet?
We have Janet Link with us today, and Janet, we're excited about this topic. I'm not going to say any specifics because I really want the listeners to hear all the great things that because you've been practicing this for yourself. But today we're going to be talking about journaling, right?
Yeah.
And Janet's always posting stuff on her Instagram stories and stuff like that. And one day, she said she did all the stories about journaling, and it really resonated with me. And
with both of
us, because I shared it with Philip, and he said we should have this conversation, in-depth conversation about journaling and how, just the benefits and how that's important, how that can help us in the spiritual lives, and if it can help us track a growth and all of that. But so that's why we have brought you on here, because I everything you were saying, I was like, this is really great insight, and I'm also thankful that you shared it with us. But also, I want other people who follow Bond of Peace in Christ to be able to sort of like to learn more about that as well. So I'm really excited about this conversation today. Yeah.
So feel free, go ahead and tell us, a little bit about your journaling practices, how it's benefited you.
Yeah, well, I feel like I should start off by saying that I recently have started therapy, which has been really beneficial for me. I feel like I was kind of getting into the habit of like coming home from work and then just like dissociating on my like phone, and like just kind of not listening to my inner dialogue or my thoughts. So I've, therapy in general has helped me to be more mindful. But I had the idea recently to start just like right at nighttime. I was getting pretty anxious, or like if I have something on my mind, I'd just like be going over and over that in my head, and I'd have trouble sleeping. So I would just start writing down some things just to get it out on paper and out of my brain a little bit. So I kind of made it a practice, like a concerted effort for about like a week to write 5 things at night that I'm giving to God, that I'm, feeling anxious about, stressed about, or just a thought that I had that's like kind of sticking in my brain. And I say, I'm giving this to God. Once I close that journal, I put it at my bedside table and I can go to sleep, mindful that this is in God's hands.
Wow. So,
and yeah,
not to cut in, but so that's actually it's a pretty beautiful, it's kind of like not you're relieving yourself of the added weight of having that internal. And so writing it down is almost like it's almost like you're purging what would be, let's say, doubts or negative thoughts, and you're just lifting that up to God.
Yeah. And wow. What's been really helpful for me is that in a weird way, and I'll go into this deeper in a little while, but I think it really has helped my relationship with God as far as like relying on him more. Like we're not supposed to just, it's not that we're not supposed to have anxiety. That's so normal and natural for everyone.
Exactly.
That's life. It's day to day. But what we should be doing is trusting God with those topics or whatever.
Yep.
I was just gonna say that some, like you said at the beginning, like you said, 2 things have really resonated with me with the whole idea of before there was a lot happening. You get anxious at night, but then you would just get on your phone and do stuff. Then you don't really have that inner dialogue with yourself. And it sounds like journaling almost forces you to have to sit down and think and reflect and have the inner dialogue with yourself. I'm going to throw out a real one verse that I had on here was Proverbs 27 verse 6, where it says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. So it's like journaling is almost like this friend, because it helps you to have that inner dialogue. And then it also sort of like, you have you will write it down because so you've been doing like, and in the process of doing that, you're writing all your doubts and everything on paper, whatever is making you anxious. and then at the same time you're also leaving that to God. I think that is a really, really powerful practice.
Right. Yeah. And it's not like dismissing yourself. Like sometimes we have thoughts and then just like try to push them away or don't really acknowledge and listen to them. And I think, we can be our own friend and, a better servant of God by like really listening to the thoughts that are coming up and then, giving them to God.
Yeah. And I wonder if it almost is, and it forces you to be honest too, because if you're feeling this, and I wonder, wait, is there a way to fake journal? Do you think?
That's a good question.
I don't know. Are we always honest with a true feelings and everything when what we experience when we're journaling, or are we do some of those feelings get so uncomfortable that we don't want to sit in them and actually write them out?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not honest at first, eventually once you keep writing, it all starts coming out.
Yeah,
so it helps you be more honest with yourself for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I wanted to say that I didn't, I don't leave it at that. At nighttime, I'll write down those anxieties. And then in the morning, it's a really good opportunity to start fresh and really reflect on the things that are really good in life, that are really, I'm really grateful for this. And in a way, that's writing those 5 things that I'm thankful for. I've been forced to get specific with it. Like I can't keep on writing family, friends, food, shelter, all those things, other classics. I have to be specific, and it's like, it might be a Bible verse that I read, or it might be my cat laying at my feet, or like sometimes like random funny things, like, oh, this episode of the show I like is coming out tonight, whatever it is. But it really has kind of, it's really like made my mindset, it's almost instant how my mindset is more positive. It's and I'm not saying it's like, like a solution, the only solution to improving your happiness or your joy in life, or but it really has helped.
Compliments.
Yeah. And it acknowledges God's blessings, so it's appreciating God more too.
I like that idea, because like being grateful and writing down it's like you're acknowledging acknowledging God's blessings. And I personally, I don't think that I do that enough. I don't do it as often as I think that I should.
Yeah, but on that train of thought, so some people are introverts, right? We know what that means when that involves other people, right? But then we have some people who I'm probably in that category, where even having these moments with yourself, diving into the grid of things. So, for example, putting up a wall with somebody else is probably more commonly seen, but putting up a wall even with yourself and being able to break down the anxiety that comes with diving into the deep end of yourself. It's a beautiful exercise, journaling, because once you can tear down that wall, I believe that it influences your prayer. It influences how intimate of a conversation you can have with God. And have you found anything as far as growth in when you journal? From where you started to begin with, maybe it was a little bit few words, and then over the
one
years,
sentence, and now you have like pages long.
Some more elaborate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like as far as like, I used to write just like day to day. Like I remember looking back in my old journals when I was a kid, and I'd be like, today I woke up and I had breakfast, whatever it was, or like just things that were happening day to day. And I find that I don't do as well with that type of journaling. I get kind of burnt out. It's not as sustainable for me. But this has really helped, because it's just it's doing the 5 at night, the 5 in the morning, but it's also just, if I have a thought that just comes up and I'm like, wait, why do I think that? Or what's going on there? Like let me dive into that. Even if it's not like, I don't sit down for a long time and write. It might just be one sentence that I write down, just so that I can remember that and reflect on it even later. it's like having a constant communication with yourself. You're acknowledging those thoughts, and it's for me, that type of journaling just works a little better. And then I can use like picture taking as a way to remember what happened, but
Yeah.
I mean, different styles of journaling work for different people, but I definitely have seen, just in the time that I've been more like active in journaling recently, I've seen that I've like been acknowledging my thoughts a lot more. And yeah, and it helps me get more specific with my prayers. And God knows so much about us. He knows the hairs on our head. He knows he puts our tears in a bottle, and he knows that we're dust, and he knows us so intimately. So I think, in learning more about ourselves and being more reflective, we're able to get to know more about who God's created in us, and and who we are as servants.
I have never thought of it that way. It's like the idea of getting to know what God, this creature, which is me, that's something that God has created. And it's like we spend so much time trying to learn other things, but not really. It's like God created us, and it's such a beautiful thing. And taking the time to know that, I've never ever thought of it that way. So this is like a light bulb moment for me.
No, that's there was another verse in First Peter, right? First Peter chapter 2, beginning at verse 2, it says, "As newborn babies desire the sincere milk of the word, that ye may grow thereby." This idea in First Peter about like God keeps track of our growth. And it's very hard for us to, when you talk about, even when we're building an essay or we're writing a script for something, the idea of outlining, and the idea of outlining not just what we want out of a project, but also listing the things that are wrong. Where are the flaws in my work? Where are the flaws in my approach to how I may have approached something yesterday? Being able to jot that down, look at it, and there's so much benefits to being able to dissect just all of the different elements of life. And once again, there's different approaches to journaling, as you mentioned. But that's when I saw your story on Instagram, because I used to journal. I'm really big into pens. I'm really big into paper.
Let's not have that pen conversation.
And so I almost romanticized the idea. So I almost romanticized the idea of journaling. But when I journaled, my take was the purging thing. I remember, similar to what you said, someone said something about when you intake something that is negative to the body, right? The body wants to get rid of it, right? It has to purge it so that it can, if there's something foreign in here that the body doesn't like, take it out. And so the way that it was told to me, that journaling is, if you look at it that way, journal. No one else needs to see it. Journal your deepest and just your thoughts. And there's something to that, because I believe that that's a lot of what David did, even in the Psalms.
Yeah, I think almost think that the Psalm are like David's journal entries, because there's some psalm that's about a cry for help, the some about like God's love, and some about trusting God, and all those are recorded for our own instruction. And I wonder just how much our own reflections of our own lives and how God is working can be useful for our own growth and instruction as well. Like just tracking. Before I get into what my thought, how often, I always ask, because I journal, and sometimes I would journal and then never go back to read it until like 1 year later. And I wonder how often, especially if you want to track your growth just in your life or your spiritual growth, like how often should we be going back to read our journal entries?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. I wonder if David went back and read his
right
or something.
I don't know.
But I mean, I feel like that's I sometimes read it the next day, just to like kind of reflect. And I think to go along with what you were saying, Philip, we can sometimes like convince ourselves that we're right about something. Like if we're just, if we're just so in this mindset of like, I'm right, or self-righteousness. So that's why I think it's so vital in this as believers that while we're journaling, we're also praying and we're also reflecting on God's word too. Because I mean, you think of, David, he had to be called out sometimes by like by the prophet who said, when he sinned with Bathsheba. Yeah. And so, having that, being able to go back and look at what you've written and kind of reflect on it, and then like encourage your friends to hold you accountable, and being prayerful and reading scriptures along with journaling is also very important, because it will help that progress. You won't be just digging yourself into a hole.
So really, in a nutshell, do you think that using scripture as a gateway, so like using scripture as a prompt, like you read the scriptures and then you reflect on it and then you journal, with that? Or I'm just trying to make sure I understand what you're saying about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's wise. I don't necessarily do that like right before bedtime all the time, because it's just like a really quick little thing that I do just before bed to just get it out on paper. But I think like just being mindful of making it a daily practice, then your headspace is going to be centered around the Word of God, and you're going to be bringing that to reference in your head when you're journaling.
Yeah, and that idea of keeping track and looking back, because I remember I used to do that as well, and I've looked back at journals that I had from like years ago, and instantly I threw them away. I like ripped them up. I'm like, nobody needs to see this. I acknowledge the growth, and it's out of here. but it's if you do this type of thing, right, this type of practice, especially if you're looking, and maybe growth will happen. Maybe we shouldn't go away, and maybe that's too intimidating sometimes to think that, because what is the result, right? The result is that I think that there's a closer bond being formulated between you and yourself and with God, and our spiritual relationship will benefit from that. But look at everything that we do, right? We're constantly checking for the gains. If we're trying to work out and lose weight, we're constantly hopping on the scale. If we're investing in something with our money, you're constantly, many people say you shouldn't, but you're constantly checking to see, how's this stock doing? And because the experience that you're talking about, even just looking back a day to see where you were in your headspace and being able to say, snap,
keeping track.
I felt at my lowest point and I didn't know how I was going to get out of it, but God brought me out of it. Here I am a day later, being able to look back and almost testifying with yourself about.
And it also helps you to sort of, if we go back to look back, you're tracking that, because things, and sometimes we think that we remember, we forget.
Yeah.
And it would help you to sort of like hold on to the good habits. And if there's something that, and then you can, and then sort of like get rid of the things that the bad habits or whatever you want to label them, right? Yeah. Because then you can, but if we just never go back to look at them, then you just don't know how you're doing. So it's like for you to see that you're growing, you definitely have to track it. There's no growth without progress. And how do you know that you're making progress? By actually seeing results. And how do you see the results? By actually looking back. So we have to track.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Laura. I feel like we can almost get like, if we don't really keep track of these things, we can get so hard on ourselves that we're constantly in like a negative state of mind, and we're not really able to acknowledge of like, look how God brought me out of that situation.
Yeah.
Look how he pulled me up out of the miry pit. Like
and that could be such a great motivator. Like when you look at how many times that God has come through for you, then you can be like, okay, he's still gonna come. It's like a great motivator to keep the faith, keep trusting God, and But sometimes if we don't remember, we don't keep track, then we forget, and then we just, like you said, continue to stay in that gloomy place.
When I was journaling, I was like, it's so apparent to me that my deepest, most profound statements on paper are only profound to me, really.
I'm glad you have that acknowledgement.
And it can be humbling. It can be a very humbling experience if we have that outlook that everyone has their own journey that they're going through.
and yet, you know, even though we kind of make ourselves the main character, we really hold our you know, selves, we esteem ourselves better than others a lot of the time. And we're told to do the opposite. But but still, I think, you know, God knows even the most mundane details about us, regardless of, you know, how commonplace they are, and you know, so many people have those experiences. But God does care about them, and so it's incredible that he's able to care about everyone's problems. So, you know, giving yourself grace in that sense too, of, you know, this is small, we are small, but it's still important to God, and taking the time to cultivate that is so healthy for, you know, our relationship with God as well.
Not to discredit the gravity of, even if it is small, but they are real problems that we have.
And so far, like, I'm just gonna do a quick recap of what we've discussed so far, which I think have resonated with me. The whole idea that journaling sort of like helps us to have that, to sit still and have an inner dialogue with ourselves, but at the same time helps us to write out our doubts and whatever it is that we, emotions or feelings or whatever we're feeling, and lift it up to God, and trust that God, casting our cares onto the Lord. For we know He will provide for us, and casting that onto God. But then at the same time, it also helps us, like with your gratitude practice, Bobby, Janet, it helps us to acknowledge God's blessings. And then one thing that for me, which I'm gonna leave this feeling so happy that we have had this conversation, is like, it helps me, or helps us, to get to know the creature that God has created, which is me, yourself, or whoever is doing the journaling. And like you said, Bobby, sometimes to journal, we can get we can become self-righteous, but always sort of like counterbalance with the scriptures, and be prayerful about it, and sort of asking God to help us see and understand our journey and track our progress, and all the whole shebang. So I'm going to throw this question out there. Is it a good idea for us to continuously use journaling to track our spiritual and faith journey?
I would say that it's dependent on the person. For some people, different strategies work. I think it is very helpful for me, mostly because it does help me walk circumspectly, because I've written down a lot of things. I've been reflective, and now I have to hold myself accountable. I've written it down, so now I have to, like, really follow through a little bit with you know, with my goals, or with my my, you know, whatever's causing that anxiety. So yeah, I think for me personally, journaling consistently does help my spiritual health, because I'm being more mindful each day of the choices I make, and a little more circumspect. I'm looking around. I'm like, what is the best choice here? I've only kind of recently gotten back into it, and so I will say more of the short-term benefits have been more, you know, what I've been noticing recently is just like a general, like, sense of gratitude. Even when I'm having a rough time of it, I'm kind of like, generally, I still have this understanding that God's really blessed me, and I'm really thankful for these different things. So I think I can only really reflect on what the short-term benefits, but I will say in general, I can imagine that it's going to be really beneficial for my spiritual life as well, and I hope so. That's kind of like ultimately that's the goal.
Definitely.
What do you guys think? I mean, I know you journaled a little bit, Philip. Laura, I don't know. Did you do much journaling?
I do journal, but most times I'll fall off the bandwagon, and then sometimes maybe at the beginning of the year. This is the first year that I've gone into the new year without actually actively journaling. I usually, at the beginning of the year, I'm always very active with my journaling, but I think that I've always kept a journal different points in my life, and I always have an active journal that sometimes I don't do it as consistently as I would like to, and I wonder if it's because of the journal that I'm using. Like you said, maybe
So, fun fact. When we first started dating, one of Larinette's first gifts to me was a gratitude journal. She got one for herself and she got one for me. And I think probably the first week we were doing it, it was like list 5 things. And then that was the first point when I noticed that sometimes even doing both, because I think if you just use one, you might be missing out in the exercise of another. Mm-hmm. So the gratitude stuff, just having a journal that is only for gratitude ideas, or thoughts may get you to speak about gratitude if you weren't in just a regular loose journal, just writing thoughts. So when I noticed, I was like, I like the gratitude stuff, but I got some stuff to say.
Yeah.
So Larinette and I have had a woman in our lives, Binta, our grandmother, who is like a stalwart of journaling. She would just be constantly journaling. She was, it wasn't something that she missed, I don't think, in a year. Like she really was good at keeping on top of her journal. And
I think she was one of the most like self-aware individuals. And I think her style was more of the day-to-day, this is what happened, this is how I felt about it kind of thing. So and then our other grandmother, Nana, would kind of write more on like, this is what happened day to day. But it's really good looking back because you can see how things have changed in your life, or the improvement you've made. So I think different styles work for different people. And for me, something I've been very mindful of is that as the new year comes around and everyone's making their New Year's resolutions, I find that I work best with something that's smaller, that's sustainable. It's more sustainable for me. Because I've struggled with, black and white thinking of like, I have to go all out or nothing at all. So for me, this is something that this style of journaling is a little bit more doable for me. So that's why I've kind of been focusing on this style.
Yeah.
Nice. No, really, really great tips. And I think many people, if you're watching this and you are anything like myself, and when people suggest things, you go in the other direction, give it a try.
Yeah.
I'll be surprised if someone says, I've never spoken to someone who was like, I did journaling, tried it, didn't help at all. Normally it's like, I've either fell off the wagon and I need to get back. You see how important it is in life. Even outside of, I think this is a topic that it was great that we're having this discussion, because I don't really hear a lot of it in regards to spiritual growth or in regards to the church.
I'd be curious to know how people have used journaling to sort of like keep track of their spiritual growth or decline and how that has helped them trying to get to know myself better. That's going to be my journaling perspective, like goal for the year. I want to get to know this person that God has created and just be very aware. So that's something I'm taking out of this conversation. I'm going to put into practice.
I'm glad that I made the post, not because I usually don't do things that are that like just out there. I just like recorded it and I put it up and I was just like,
and I am so glad that you did, because look at that, here we are.
But for me, it just was encouraging because I was like, wow, I'm not in this alone. I feel like this, a lot of people struggle with anxiety or getting in a more negative mindset or falling short day to day and just feeling like you're dissociating from your mindset. You're kind of just detaching from yourself. And so many people related. So it was really helpful to feel like we're not alone in this. And there's small things that we can do to improve.
And at least also the verse that you were talking about, Bobby, you remember?
Oh my goodness, yeah. The verse, I think this was actually one of Vinta's favorite verses. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And that word acknowledge is not just like, oh hey, how's it going? It's include him in your life. Incorporate God in every aspect of your life, and because he is our life, so making sure that we're giving those things to him. We trust him so much with everything, and we love him, and we're grateful to him, and so we are mindful and we respect him in the sense that we're really like, we're not trying to do things by ourselves. We're giving them to him at night, and it so.
And like you said, journaling is such a good way to write it down and lift it down and give it to God.
Just give it to God.
Yeah. So thank you for having this conversation with us. This was very lovely and enjoyable.
Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Janet. And so until next time,
all right.
Y'all crack those journals open, right? And
let us know what you're discovering in the comment section.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right.
Until
God
next
bless
time.
y'all.
Take care, man.